The mansion of billionaire Alexander Ford had always been a silent kingdom, its marble halls echoing only with the footsteps of maids, guards, and assistants who feared stepping out of line. But everything changed the day a young woman named Clara joined as the new maid, unaware that her kindness would spark a chain of events no one in the household was prepared for. Clara was gentle, patient, and soft-spoken, with a warmth that contrasted with the coldness of the mansion's golden walls, and though she had only been hired for a week, she had already formed a strange connection with Ethan, the billionaire's 7-year-old son who was infamous for having the temperament of a storm. Ethan had gone through more than 5 nannies in the past year, each one quitting after his uncontrollable outbursts, violent tantrums, and refusal to follow even the simplest instruction. Some whispered behind closed doors that the boy was cursed with privilege, others believed he was simply born rude, but Clara sensed something different underneath his anger, fear, loneliness, and the longing to be understood. So she treated him not as a burden, but as a child who had been starved of the one thing money could never buy, affection. But on this particular morning, as the sun spilled through the tall French windows, Clara found Ethan sitting on the floor of the grand hall, fists clenched, breathing hard, as if preparing for battle. She approached slowly, kneeling beside him with a soft smile. "Ethan," she said gently, "it's time for breakfast. Chef made your favorite pancakes." The boy glared at her with fiery eyes, growling under his breath like a cornered animal. "I don't want to," he shouted, pushing away her hand as she reached toward him. Clara stayed calm as always. "We don't have to rush. But you can't stay here alone. I'll sit with you, okay?" She extended her hand again, but this time, Ethan snapped, literally. With a sudden jerk forward, he bit her wrist with all the strength of his tiny jaw. Clara gasped, her eyes widening, the pain shooting through her arm like fire, yet she didn't scream or push him away. Instead, she tightened her jaw and whispered, "It's okay, you're safe, it's okay," even though tears threatened to escape. Hearing the commotion, the head housekeeper, Madison, rushed in, gasping dramatically at the sight. "Ethan! What on earth are you doing?" she cried, her voice trembling. Behind her, Alexander Ford himself appeared, his silver hair and piercing eyes giving him the presence of a king whose castle had just been violated. "Ethan! You're going to hurt her," he roared as he ran forward, panic etched into his usually calm, controlled face. Ethan released Clara's wrist instantly, but instead of guilt, confusion filled his tiny eyes. He looked at Clara's reddening skin, at the mark of his own teeth slowly swelling on her wrist, and he froze. His breath hitched, and for the first time in years, he looked afraid, not of punishment, but of what he had done. Alexander expected Clara to step back, cry, or demand punishment for the boy, like so many nannies had done before. But Clara did something no one expected. She pulled Ethan gently into her arms. "It's all right," she whispered, sliding her uninjured hand over his trembling back. "You're not bad. You're just hurting." Ethan, stunned, didn't pull away. Instead, he slowly, hesitantly leaned into her chest, his tiny fingers gripping her sleeve. Alexander stood frozen, his expression breaking, from anger, into shock, and then something deeper. Madison covered her mouth, whispering, "He's letting her hold him," because no one in the mansion, not even his father, had been able to comfort him like that. Clara stayed on the floor with Ethan until his heavy breath softened into quiet sobs, and when he finally looked up, his eyes were glossy with guilt. "I didn't mean to," he whispered shakily. Clara brushed his hair back. "I know. But instead of biting, next time tell me what you feel. You can be angry. Just don't hurt yourself or others, okay?" Ethan nodded, wiping his face messily with his sleeve. Alexander knelt beside them, his voice unusually soft. "Ethan, why did you do that?" The boy sniffled. "I thought she would leave me. Everyone leaves." And just like that, the truth spilled out, raw, painful, and unfiltered. Clara's heart broke. Alexander leaned back slightly, as if someone had struck him. He had been burying himself in meetings, business deals, and endless travel since the death of his wife, Ethan's mother, who had passed away when the boy was only 4. Ethan had spent years mourning alone while his father drowned himself in work, thinking money and caregivers could fill the void. Now the consequences stood before him, small, trembling, and terrified of losing the only kindness he'd recently known. Clara looked up at Alexander. "He doesn't need discipline right now," she said softly. "He needs connection." Alexander swallowed hard. I didn't know he felt that way." "Children rarely say what hurts them," Clara replied gently. "They show it." Ethan's tiny fingers tugged on Alexander's sleeve. "Dad, are you gonna leave again?" The billionaire's breath hitched. "No," he whispered, his voice breaking for the first time. "I'm here. I promise, I'm here." Clara stood slowly, wincing at the pain in her wrist, and Alexander saw it clearly for the first time, the injury, the swelling, the mark of what his son had done. "We need to take you to the medic," he said urgently, but Clara shook her head. "Ethan needs me more." "But you're hurt." "And he's hurting too," she replied gently. Ethan looked at her wrist with horror. "I did that," he whispered. Clara knelt again. "Yes, but you're going to help me make it better, okay? You're going to learn how to use your words instead of your teeth. Deal?" He nodded quickly, desperate to fix what he had broken. Clara stood tall, gently leading him toward the breakfast room, and to Alexander's shock, Ethan held her hand the entire way, as if she were the only safe place in his chaotic world. Madison whispered to Alexander, "Sir, in all these years, I've never seen Ethan listen to anyone like that." Alexander exhaled. "Neither have I." After breakfast, when Ethan insisted on putting the bandage on Clara's wrist himself, whispering apologies over and over, Alexander watched with a mix of shame and admiration. Clara had done in one morning what no professional therapist, nanny, or doctor had managed in years. She had reached his son's heart. Later that afternoon, Alexander called Clara into his private study. "Clara," he began, his voice steady but heavy, "you've done something extraordinary." She shook her head humbly. "I only did what anyone should." "No," he said firmly. "You did what no one could. Including me." Clara glanced down. "Ethan is a wonderful boy. He just needs someone to stay." Alexander took a deep breath, his eyes softening. "Will you stay? Not just as a maid, but as Ethan's personal caretaker. Someone who can help him heal." Clara looked surprised. "Are you sure?" "I mean, I'm not a professional therapist. You're exactly what he needs," Alexander insisted. "Someone who sees him. Someone who doesn't fear him. Someone who loves him enough to stay even when he lashes out." Clara hesitated, then nodded with a soft smile. "Then I'll stay." And just when Alexander felt relief wash over him, Ethan burst into the study, running straight to Clara. "Are you staying?" he asked breathlessly. Clara crouched to meet his eyes. "Yes. I'm not going anywhere." The boy threw his arms around her waist, and Alexander felt a single tear escape his eye, not out of sadness, but out of gratitude. Over the next weeks, everything changed in the Ford mansion. Ethan began speaking more, laughing more, and even apologizing when he got too angry. He started sleeping through the night. He stopped throwing things. He stopped hiding under tables. And most importantly, he stopped biting. Clara sat with him through nightmares, taught him how to express his emotions, and read him bedtime stories his mother used to read. For the first time in years, Ethan healed, and so did Alexander, slowly stepping back into his son's life, learning how to become a father again. One evening, as Clara braided Ethan's hair while he giggled on her lap, Alexander watched from the doorway with a smile. "Clara," he said softly, "you didn't just save Ethan, you saved this family." Ethan nodded excitedly. "She saved my heart." Clara laughed and kissed his head. You saved mine too, Ethan." And from that moment on, a new family began to form, not built on wealth, silence, or discipline, but on kindness, patience, and the courage to stay even when things got hard. And as you're watching this story right now, remember, sometimes one act of compassion can change a life forever. If you want more powerful stories like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stay with us for more heart-touching tales that will keep you inspired every single day.